How to get my bosses to respect continuity? Business questions answered here. Welcome to Business Questions Answered Here. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I'm a business and leadership consultant. I have an MBA, and most importantly, I have made lots of mistakes in over 20 years of trying to manage my small business. I would like to help you by allowing you to learn from both my personal mistakes and my decades worth of study and research into the subject. To submit your questions for this podcast, please visit our website, businessquestionsansweredhere.com. This episode is sponsored by FreshBooks. More on our sponsor in a bit, but first, this week's question. Debra has a new job working for a small family business, but the family is having trouble getting on the same page in procedures, and this is causing some issues for Debra. Here's her question. I just got past my probation period working as an aide for a family law and accounting firm. The firm specializes in two things: handling the legal difficulties of dividing a large estate and managing the accounting and finances for small to medium business in town that want, quote, the hometown feel, which is their actual slogan. It's a 4-generation-old business with 3 generations fighting for control of how things are run. It isn't so much infighting as it is pure desire not to cooperate with stereotypical generational values. And so I found that consistency between the partners is non-existent, and I would like to try to work some standardization into some of the shared processes. But I'm pretty sure that would be a mistake without some serious buy-in from a senior family member. Is it worth the risk for a blurb on an updated resume? So, Debra, thank you so much for this question, and let me lay out the situation as I understand it here from what you're working at before I go into the actual answer. And I'm going to tell you this is one of those times where the standard answer may not work out so well. So here's what I'm looking at. You have a business, and it doesn't really matter what they do, but it's a business that is built with a family in mind. It's not only a family-owned business, it's run by various members of the family who happen to have generational issues. So we're saying 3 generations. So say there are millennials and Gen Xers and baby boomers all in the same area, and it was funded or began by someone a generation beforehand. So the first generation who opened it essentially are gone, and now there are 3 generations who are keeping it going and not keeping things consistent as far as business practices, which makes you as an aide a bit concerned because going from one partner to the other partner means not only are they doing different things, but they have different sort of generational mindsets. You say stereotypical. Maybe there really are generational mindsets. Maybe they're just sort of one side believes the other side is a little lazier than the other or something like that. So that's what we're looking at right here. And what you want to do is come up with some sort of standard and bring in some continuity into the whole process. Essentially, come up with a checklist for certain repeatable tasks that all of the partners share so that either the partners themselves or the aides that work for them can do the exact same thing the exact same way to streamline the process, making things easier and, in a sense, making things a better business practice for the whole business. Everything should work fine and dandy for there. Now, I have to back up a little bit and tell you the story from my early days starting off as a radio producer. I once told a salesperson who I was working with how a process that we had to do to get something done worked because she asked that question. So I assumed her asking it means she really was just slightly curious at least. And it was actually a fairly simple procedure. So I gave her the details. It was a 3-step process. I gave her the 3 steps. After I explained it, and then I stopped talking, I looked at her and realized that there was just a blank stare coming back at me. So I just sort of centered myself, a little angrier back in those days. I took a deep breath and said one word, magic. When she heard that, she smiled. She said, "Oh, cool," and walked away. That is a completely true story. Completely true. And I like to tell it for a few reasons. I never give away any clues to who the salesperson was other than the fact that she was a she, and there was a lot of women working in the building in the sales department at the time, so that doesn't really kind of cover who it is. And I don't even think she even remembers who she were asking the question, so that's not a big deal right there. But the real reason that question pops up often in things is that it is a perfect example of a person only caring about the results that are done and not actually focusing on the work that makes it get there, because they don't have to do it. If you're tasked by someone to do something and it comes back exactly what they wanted, in most cases, it's not that important. However, this may not be where things lie where you are right now, because what you have in this case are various people with various ideas and ways things should be done, doing those things in various ways. They also happen to be family. So there's other underlying issues with the business that don't come into play during office hours or at the office, because these people have to live with each other at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, at birthday parties. They don't have the luxury of escaping themselves to go away for a while when they leave the office, or when they leave the family gatherings. They leave the family gatherings to go back to the office, or they leave the office to go to the family gatherings. So they all have to deal with whatever personal, private, relational issues they have as a family. Sometimes people in family businesses just show up for work and get things done. And a lot of it is based on fear and anger towards the patriarch or matriarch at the top of the family, and they just deal with it. Sometimes in family businesses, things are just so well run and the family works so well together that whether they have issues in the family way or not, the business works perfectly. Or sometimes the business doesn't work so great because of issues in the market or how things are run, but the family is always tight together. I don't have that information from what we have in the question, but this is my suggestion. Normally, I usually toss out it's always maybe, because maybe this or maybe that. And that's sort of the standard opening answer, and I give you whys and why nots. In this case, I'm going to say you probably shouldn't present the continuity you're going to work on, because it sounds like you've already got this thing in your mind you're going to work on it anyway. But these are the reasons why you need to create some sort of continuity for the work projects going on. Starting off with that, and then I'll tell you why you shouldn't share it at the back end. Number one, it'll be great practice for a place where your work will be appreciated. So practicing anything, the whole 10,000 hours thing, practicing anything enough time with deliberate practice will make you an expert at it. Now, continuity is something I'm actually fairly good with and familiar with, because it's something that I had to learn very early in college, preparing for my roles going to the Air Force, because everything is built on continuity. You never know at what moment, because if you're dealing in a wartime situation, you may lose a person at any moment, and that person is critical. Their job has to be done, so someone has to find a way to do it. And continuity binders were the thing, all the rage, or checklists if you're looking at something on the flight line. But a continuity binder that tells you exactly how to do the job, exactly where things are, exactly how the orders should be done, and how to contact the right people was something we were doing in college, getting prepared for our officer days as actually being on active duty. So the practice of doing it, the practice of taking a process, breaking it down into its critical pieces, and sometimes non-critical pieces, and putting it down into where it needs to go, how it needs to be put together, and the proper procedures to get it done, so that you can hand that off to someone and they can carry it and just get to work on something, is great practice. Number two, that blurb you talked about in your resume, you'll make great practice and a great point in that blurb before your resume that you've worked this massive community of family people in this lawyer accounting thing and turned what was a bunch of non-linear processes into a coherent list. So you were able to take this as a living case study of sorts and make the thing happen. You took something that could have been something academic, like a bunch of bits and pieces, and placed it together in an order as a practice. But in your case, you put something real and made it into something that can really be used in continuity. Now, on the third level, this is something that may actually work out to your favor, because maybe the other aides are looking for someone to step up and lead this effort because they want some sort of continuous action to work on things. They want some sort of standardization, and if someone's able to work on it, whether with the full approval of someone at the top of the boss line, or just kind of on the side where you did the project sort of just underneath to make things happen, because We all know in a lot of cases it's the aides, it's the secretaries, it's the assistants that actually make things run for the people higher up. Then that might be a great thing and a great morale booster for you, for the other aides in the building, and of course, give you that eye of being sort of the leader of the bunch, assuming no one gets too jealous and blows the whole thing up. Now, let's say you actually do this or get this thing started. So you get some of the processes that are just common to the whole process and practice of the firm, but just because different people like it different ways, or different people don't like certain parts of it, or maybe certain people really don't want to work with other people because they think the generational thing is a real problem. Once you get this thing into some semblance of order and you find that it actually is something that will work and is decent, you need to be wary of how you present it to some higher up. I'm telling you to go ahead and start doing some scribbling and working on it, putting things in order right now, but do that before you actually present it to someone in power, in charge. If you feel like you have a plan that really will work out towards the benefit of the company, and no one in the company will come down and bear the weight of the having to deal with change on you, then it's probably a grand idea, once you have something that's going to be semi in place, to present that, not just the idea, but an actual plan to someone at a higher level that you respect. Or maybe not the highest level, maybe someone that you work with directly is one of the younger partners. If you're cool with them, in a sense, and they like hearing what you have to say, then bam, that's the person you need to get in on, and you convince them that they need to shoot this around to the family. And that's exactly how it should be presented. Something that an aide came up on their behalf, they built because you asked, or you built it because they asked you for it, is something they want to disseminate through the company. That's going to be the only way this works. If you go to the company president and say, here, sir, this is the Bible to how things work around here. We've been tested in it. We've been working on it. All the aides know what goes on. If we follow this thing, you'll find you'll have your 15% bump in efficiency off the bat, which means more money, whatever. It's not going to work, because this is a case where you're hired to be an aide and you're not hired to be a consultant. And I'm pretty sure they've probably heard plenty of consultants give them similar stuff, but what you have to do is appeal to the heart and mind of one particular person, someone that you really, truly trust, really, truly believe will listen to you. And if they say no, won't give you ridicule and won't fire you for trying to take over the company. That being said, you probably just want to hold this in your back pocket, and not as a plan to sell off to competition, but a plan to use as your case study to see this is how things are done when someone needs an idea what's going on. It's just like making a portfolio of pictures and images when you go off to sell yourself as a wedding photographer. You want to show people examples of what you've done before and what you can do with different situations. This is a real life example of you putting into place or putting into at least to practice a plan that you wanted to put in place based on the limits of the company you're working with. Now, it all comes down to the limits of the company you're working with, whether they want to deal with you or not. But it all is that's the way business works, especially if it's a family business or a small private owned business that may be ran by a couple of people that were college buddies that have that little relationship thing going on. They have to maintain relationships, and they have to maintain the business. And so sometimes those get mixed up and get kind of crazy. So if you know the right person to react, who will react to this in the right way, and at least will not blow up on you if they don't like it, then you can present it to them and see how it goes. But I'm telling you to go ahead and draft some work on your own time, bits and pieces how things are going on, and have this thing as something to see. If the folks in the aid society, all the other aides there with you, seem to like it and are pushing you to keep going and also helping out with it, then it's probably something that's really needed, and you can work on and work sort of in the underlings in that sort of realm of, as long as it gets done, I don't want to know what the details are. Don't tell me how it worked. Just give me what I want, and that'll be fine. But presenting it as a full-fledged plan to the board, that might be a bit difficult. If you believe you can pull it off, then hey, more power to you. If you don't, and that one person you want to share it with doesn't seem to be all that keen on listening to this new idea, then put it in your back pocket. Make sure you have a copy of it when you send out your resume. Of course, redact the names and all that stuff to save yourself any embarrassment and maybe any legal trouble if you disclose something out there. And just have it as an example of some work you've done in building continuity from, looks like, scratch in a company that had no real continuity to deal with together. So that's my answer to this week's question. Now, if you have a problem in your business and that problem is dealing with accounting software, maybe FreshBooks is the answer for your particular needs. The all-new FreshBooks is accounting software that makes running your small business easy, fast, and, of course, secure. You can spend less time on accounting and more time doing the work you love by choosing FreshBooks, and you can get a great deal from me. You can get started for absolutely free and no credit card required. Just go to businessquestionsansweredhere.com/FreshBooks and sign up for this great deal today. Debra, thank you so much for submitting this question for this week. It is an awesome question, and I think the answer is kind of awesome too, but that's really up for you and the listeners to judge. Please keep in touch with us and make sure we know how this thing played out. You can contact us via the website, businessquestionsansweredhere.com, or send an email directly to me at info@jclevelandpayne and let me know exactly which question we talked about and how it turned out on the back end, whether for good or for not so good. Hopefully, you figure out the way to make it work best for you. If you're out there listening and you want to comment on exactly how this thing worked out as well, if you don't think my info was all that informative, let me know by contacting me as well. You can go to the website, Business Questions Answered Here, for more information about the whole project, including submitting your question for the future podcast. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode of what is, at least what I think is, pretty solid business advice, and leave ratings and reviews at your pod area of choice. We're on iTunes, we're on Spreaker, we're on Stitcher, we're on Blueberry, we're on Google Play, we're on a couple of other places that just kind of catch us where they are. If we're not someplace that you like to get your podcast from, let us know, and we'll do our best to get ourselves listed at that site as well. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for Business Questions Answered Here. Make sure you stop again next week for another great question. Questions are always great, and some pretty good, solid advice from someone who's been up and down and up and down and up and down again in business. J. Cleveland Payne here from Business Questions Answered Here.